Hi, welcome to Design for Life. I'm Pastor Dan Axtell.
I'm Jessica Chapman.
And we just wanted to take a moment and invite you into a conversation about how this process that you've been part of can absolutely change your life. So, Jessica, you have had an opportunity over many years to take some self-tests and to discover some things about yourself that really have changed the course of your life. So kind of take us back on this journey of like, how did you first start taking some of these tests to discover how God designed you to be?
Well, I think when things start off, you're a teenager, you're kind of thinking about your future, you're getting used to these things, and you're beginning to look like, what college do I want to go to? What are my passions? What am I interested in? And I think the real thing that started me off on the journey was I read a book that kind of resonated with me. It was about a woman who, she and her husband were missionaries in South America, and it really resonated with me, and I was like, oh, like I think it's been kind of in the back of my mind that I might want to go into missions, but this is like really resonating with me now, and I want to like take this forward in a serious way. And I think a lot of my initial tests, I don't think I took a lot of tests, but I took a lot of advice. And so I started talking to people who had done missions before, people who had retired from being missionaries, people who were interested in these things. And I was like, what are they doing? And what is God speaking to me at the same time? So I think using that as a way
which
to
is interesting, because I think one of
Yeah.
my fears growing up was God was going to call me into the mission field. So I don't know if any of you
Totally.
guys are like, please, if I do all these tests, there's only one condition. You can't send me in the mission field.
Don't send me to Africa.
And yet that's exactly what you were discovering as
Yeah.
you started figuring out God's design. So then move us through from like, how did you put feet on that? How did you respond? Because I think a lot of times we take these tests and we're like, I think I should do
Right.
missions.
Right.
But how do you go from this inkling to like actually doing it?
I think for me, I started on a really grassroots level. Like, okay, I don't have God speaking to me and saying, thou shalt go to such and such a place. And so I just began to engage locally. So I did women's ministry at the local jail in my county. I did teaching English as a second language. I went and got trained in that, volunteered in that. Anything that I thought like, okay, maybe God could use this. I started kind of just dipping my toes in it. And through that process, I really found things that I loved. I specifically found through that process that I loved ministry to women. And that came out of that time in jail, working in jails. I also led women's Bible studies not women's Bible studies, but Bible studies for teenage girls. Found I loved that. And so that is one of the things I can look back now and see that God was using ministry to women as a thing that would keep coming up as a theme. But it was in that initial just get my feet wet and see what this looks like.
And so then I know your story. So I'm like, how did you get into the mission field from
Right.
working in the jails and locally?
So I actually took a 3-month medical mission trip to Haiti, where I ended up becoming like, I'm kind of interested in becoming a nurse. I went back to the States, became a nurse. But through that time, it was always like, I wanted to be a missionary and I wasn't sure. But for me, it was a path of just obedient walking out what God put in front of me to do. So like I would sense the next step is that I'm supposed to do this. And I would obey that, not always knowing the outcome and the answer. But really sensing, I don't know if I should call it a spark, like the sense of like, okay, this is the next right thing. And it was very much would kind of resonate with something I was interested in or wanted to do it. And I think that's something that we don't take into account all the time, is that it's okay to follow the things that you're interested in and do those things.
Yeah, and that's part of the Design for Life.
Totally.
Right? We ask you, like, what do you enjoy doing? What do you desire? You know, what are you naturally good at? And so there's a lot of different pieces to this. But you went into the mission field on kind of a short term.
I did.
And discovered even more a calling to missions.
Yeah. I started going on about 3 short-term medical mission trips a year, just like trying to engage as much as I could. Every country I went to, hoping God would call me to that place, and he wouldn't. But through that process, I learned that I loved health education. I learned that I loved pairing that with evangelism. And so when a door opened itself up for me to go and do that for 2 years in Cameroon, in Central Africa, I was like, yes, this lines up and matches up with all the passions I've had for all these years, and it fits with, it's like a puzzle piece just clicking into place.
Okay, so I have to ask them, didn't it kind of ruin your career path?
Totally.
Yeah, so like how do you, how do you weave that in where you're like, well, I've got this career, I'm doing nursing, but I'm going to leave for 2
Yeah.
years and do this missionary thing.
Yeah.
And at that point, you didn't know, hey, I'm going to do missionary work for the rest
Yeah,
of my life,
totally.
as a profession, right? So how did you and God have that conversation?
I think it was a lot of me saying, I'm going to obey the next step that God puts in front of me. It's definitely a challenge sometimes to say, I'm going to set aside this thing that in everyone else's eyes is a great life. I cried when I left my job as a peds ICU nurse. I loved that job. But I also felt like my calling in life is to serve Jesus and advance his kingdom. And so for me, I have this strong thing that won't let me get comfortable in this very American life. I have to keep moving in this direction that he's pulling me towards. So sometimes, I've thought of this many times, sometimes my no is my best yes. And so saying no to a successful career as a peds ICU nurse was saying no to that, was allowing me to say yes to ministering to the marginalized and the impoverished in our world.
And so obviously you went to Cameroon, you did your 2-year stint.
Yeah.
But God was doing something even bigger than all of that, right?
Yeah.
So tell us about how you met your now husband, Timothy.
Well, I had been there a year, and mutual friends introduced us. And that was a big deal for me because I was really like, I want to be a wife and I want to be a mom. And I feel like those are parts of my calling too, but I don't know how those are all going to work out. Ended up meeting my husband, and our hearts just connected over similar life dreams.
And just to clarify, you met your husband who was also in the mission field, but not in the same mission that you were.
Not in the same country even. He was visiting from Central African Republic and came to Cameroon, and we met, and 6 weeks later we were dating.
And then fast forward, you ended up coming back stateside, putting down some roots in terms of getting married and having a child, and then through that, God is now sending you guys back into the mission field, and you just had your second child.
Yeah, totally.
So catch us up with how God has continued to lead you back into the missions.
It's interesting now because I feel like that saying goodbye to a career when I was young and single felt very different than saying goodbye to my career now. Because now I have children, I live in a good neighborhood, I have a good life, I have a great job, good benefits, and now it feels much scarier to say goodbye to that. But it still goes back to, this is what God has designed me to do. And if I try to do something else, I won't feel like I'm doing my best for him. And this is all about doing our best for Jesus, right? I have one chance at this life, and I want to do my best for Jesus. And so it is scary to say these best yeses and to say these no's to a great career and great benefits and great job. We're going to be getting half of our income. Our pay cut is significant, but that doesn't matter as much as we're doing the thing that God created and designed us to do. And because we are willing to do that, the Lord is going to use that, we know, to bless men and women and children in wherever he puts us. For now, we know that's in Guinea, in West Africa, but in the future, we have no idea where that will take us. But we know it will, as we lead and trust him, he's going to provide those opportunities for ministry.
Yeah. So, you're listening today. You've been on a journey. You heard Jessica's story. And we just want to keep encouraging you that God uses this process to take you to the places he created you to be. And when he does, you have a chance to have this kind of an experience. So I look at Jessica's face and the joy in her life, and I go, I want to go there. So I hope you do too. Thanks for joining us today.